Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about security flaws. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, does it happen at your job that someone writes code with security flaws and doesn't implement the specification completely? Or doesn't implement the specification completely, but then you talk to them, they don't understand because they can't see the flaw, they don't get it and are convinced that it was done in a good way. Yep, pretty much every single day. This is the difference between a talented software developer and a not so talented software developer usually. And it's sad to see, and I see it all the time because it happens all the way up to people who have 20 years of experience. And that's why I keep on telling people that years of experience means absolutely nothing if you're dealing with incompetent people. And the thing that should be in focus is not how many years have you done something, it is, are you actually able to perform at the level required? That's what should matter. And I don't know, like, my favorite example is the sports. As you know, I've been making references to fitness and stuff like that, and it basically is what I argue that it comes down to. It does not matter if you've been a runner for 20 years. If you show up to the Olympics and you can't actually run whatsoever because you've been like slowly walking or like lightly jogging, it doesn't matter how long you've been doing it because you can't perform at that level. And it's the same thing with anything, I argue. Years of experience means fuck all if you don't get the results. And so when I deal with software developers, it's very common, I would say, that the companies basically have, as I like to say, shit is like basically you hire people who don't really know how to solve the problems that you have, in many cases due to that you yourself don't really know who is necessary in order to solve your problem. And what happens then is that they will implement things in some way, and maybe it's going to work. If you're really lucky, it's going to be something that is fairly straightforward. As I like to say, you can hire, if you have a really simple software problem, if you're just going to build something simple, it doesn't really matter all that much who does the work because it's such a simple problem. But if you have something that is slightly more advanced, which is something that usually happens after a little while, by the time you get to that point where the talent of the software developer becomes more and more prevalent or necessary in order to maintain the system and actually build all the features and so forth, then it's too late. In many cases. Because you have already invested in people who may have been the right people for how things were looking when you started, but now 2, 3 years or 4 years down the line, when the system has become much bigger and more complicated, they are the wrong people. They've basically created a shit system that just has a lot of issues, and it's very easy to figure out whether or not you actually have people like that or not, if you know what you're looking for. But that is sadly not the case for quite a lot of people. So when your managers and so forth, they come and like why is the system doing A, B, and C? Why are there so many bugs and so forth and so forth? As I like to say, this is a talent industry. So if you go to one senior who has these issues as you're talking about, as we were talking about, they will say, no, this is completely normal. This is how it should work, or there's no one who could have done it better. When the reality is that might just be their personal opinion, which is usually very common, because a person of higher talent or more skill or so forth and so forth might have been able to solve this in a very different way, or someone who had a different background or so forth and so forth. Because I hope that we can all agree that we're good at different things. So some developers are really, really strong in, say, writing code, but are really weak in, say, testing, which is very common, I can tell you that. And so it's not that common that everybody is equally good at all the things. But one thing I can say for certain is that practically, like, yeah, I would go as far as to say that it's, in my experience at the very least, most software developers struggle with just writing code that works. It is practically unheard of that they have the ability to evaluate how secure their own code is. I mean, sure, some people might know the basics of OWASP, like SQL injection or cross-site scripting attacks or stuff like that. I mean, but that is far from the norm, guys. Like, there are so many security flaws around the world in various systems due to the fact that software developers don't actually know how to do that. And before you think I'm just gonna crap on us all, like, because I'm of course a software developer as well, I want the business owners and like the product managers and so forth to sort of understand that, guys, you have no idea how large the area of knowledge, like the pool of knowledge is in order to ship your software. I'm not excusing people who write and who don't take the time to learn their craft and things like that, but it's a little bit how do I put this? Like at some point we have to sort of come to terms with that you can't put the entire responsibility for writing like these gigantic systems in every single possible way and like make them perfect, so quote unquote now, on the software developer. Because would be the equivalent of saying that, for example, if you're going to build an airplane or a jet engine, do you think there is exactly one person, like just one jet engine designer, like jet engine creator? Usually not. Or a circuit board on a mobile phone. It's usually teams of people that need to be with different types of backgrounds and specialities that are necessary in order to build something that is highly complicated. And software is, depending on the system, highly complicated. And the delivery process is highly complicated. And knowing about security and things like that, that's a whole job. It's the basics, absolutely, we should try to make sure that software developers know, but at some point you sort of have to just understand that there is a limit to how much you can ask of one individual. So what I want you to take away from this is that I would say that, yeah, I see it pretty much every single day. Like software developers who who basically, because it's a talent industry, guys, so one person can think that they are done, they wrote all their tests, they did everything and so forth, and then that's why we have code reviews incidentally. And in the code review you figure out that actually there's a bug here, there's a bug there, that's a problem, they're missing A, B and C in their test and stuff like that. That's why we do these things, because the odds of having good code come out the door is higher if more than one person reviews the solution. And it is a daily struggle, because it comes down to, as I said, if you have low talent software developers in a team, your system is going to reflect that. I promise you that. And this is the toughest conversation I have with people, especially software developers who work on quote unquote legacy, like really shitty systems and stuff like that. And I kind of go, especially when they wrote it themselves, like from scratch, I kind of go, they go, oh, the system is shit. And I go, yeah, whose fault is that? You wrote everything. You have written everything here, and the system is shit. What does that tell you? No one else can practically control the outcome apart from you. So if the code is shit, odds are that what the work that you are doing is subpar. And honestly, that is for some reason a sensitive topic to raise with quite a lot of people, because for some reason there is this idea that the system just magically becomes shit or poor when it comes to security, etc., etc. Because as I said, guys, there is this, as a software developer, yes, you can't learn everything and take responsibility for everything, but at the same time, I don't want to just give everybody a free pass on the fact that in many cases they don't take the time to really learn how to write tests effectively. They don't take the time to just check up on basics about secure practices and things like that, because they don't have to. And that is the fundamental thing that I think is lacking in what I usually see here. That the thing that really makes the difference for a software product comes down to, do you have people who care enough to make sure that they know how to deliver software, and do they know how to do that in accordance with current best practices and things like that? Or do they just say, yeah, I don't have to care about this because nobody's forcing me? That's the most common thing I see, that systems become like bad more or less because you're dealing with people who just have software development as a job. They don't care enough to learn anything outside of the stuff that they needed in order to get the job, and they won't ever get all that. They won't actually expand their knowledge apart from the bare minimum, and the bare minimum is usually not enough to spot security flaws and all these other things, because that is it's something you're not going to get that for free during an education, usually, at the very least. It takes experience and it takes some personal investment to learn things like that. The good news is that if you are the sort of individual who learns these things and actually goes the extra mile to really get good at testing and like security and stuff like that, that usually gives you a leg up in the industry. But it's far from the norm. As I've said before, guys, most software developers, they just do this as a job. And sadly, this is a talent industry. And in many cases, that is simply not enough of an investment to really cover all your bases in terms of security, good practices, software, like good software architecture, etc., etc. We are talking about a field that is gigantic, and the bare minimum is, for most people, just get the code out the door so it roughly does what it's supposed to do. At small scale, that works. At larger scale, well, considering how rare it is for me to hear that someone says we have a really nice system, you can probably guess how sustainable it is. Have a great day.